Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So this is going to be yet again one of those videos that I do periodically, about every year, every half a year, based on how much new content we are getting, where I kind of lay out the path of progression that I think, I would take if I would get a new, if I would start a new account, or, how I personally would recommend newer players to go through the game. So we can see that the initial ones here are before the Karina challenges, before 7.2 came out, and then further on we are going as variant 8 came out, 7.3 and 4 came out, and now we are arriving here, and this is the latest update of this. So there are obviously some changes made to this video. Last one that I uploaded was about 8 months ago or so. And since then, we have had Karina Challenges Volume 2, we have had Variant 8, and we have had Act 7.3 and 4. And obviously, they do significantly affect which piece of content, in my opinion, should be done earlier, which piece of content, in my opinion, should be done later. And inevitably, as more time passes, there are also pieces of content who kind of become less important due to the rewards getting outdated, or just comparatively speaking that there's more content that can potentially award you more for less investment of revives. A good example is Abyss. Initial completion of Abyss is fine, it's doable, it takes some resources, but it's not like that insane amount. But exploring Abyss still is very, very costly, but it doesn't award the latest resource anymore. Yeah, of course, that Abyss 6-star crystal is nice, the generic awakening gem is nice, and 6 stones those are nice, but fact of the matter is that, at the top game, people now are chasing the rank 4 resources, and those are much more readily available in Karina's challenges and Act 7, because there is total lack of them in Abyss, and they do not award those anymore. I still think Abyss is worth doing, it's just I don't think it's necessarily worth rushing to explore Abyss. There are obviously a few side notes that we do need to discuss here. Road to the Labyrinth and classic variants are neat small unit grind options that I still kind of use myself. If I do have energy left over and if I don't need to farm anything, then I go and just kind of complete or start exploring the first chapters of the classic variant difficulty. And Road to the Labyrinth is also quite a neat way to gain units if you can obviously do it without without any resource investment, realistically. Additionally to that, Road to the Labyrinth can be skipped. It's not a content that's necessarily worth doing, especially because you do not need to enter a labyrinth. Labyrinth is still very much so worth doing, in my personal opinion, if not for anything else than the tier 4 class catalyst that you can earn, because you still need an absolute load of tier 4 CCs, and it gives you a nice guaranteed chunk of that, but only if you can do it with like a minimal small item use and very kind of optimized teams. Speaking of that, I probably do need to make a new video about, ideal or best labyrinth options, in my opinion, because it's been a really long time since I made a labyrinth video. Then also try to push yourself early onto monthly side events, because comparatively speaking, monthly side events award a ton of resources compared to even a whole bunch of stuff in Act 6 when it comes to, how much effort you need to put in. Because right now we're starting to get rank 4 materials in monthly events, and we still get 6-star shards there, and we get starting to get some 6 stones in those. And even though it's extremely slow, even though it's extremely tedious, these monthly side event rewards are increasing over time, whereas Act 6 rewards, Act 5 rewards, they're static. So the quicker you can get in monthly side events and do all the difficulties, the better for your account, because those rewards are, relatively current. Try to get an alliance that primarily focuses on IQ and nets a lot of glory quite early on, because again, based on your progression level, glory store gets consistently updated, so the rewards that are up to date and current, and you can comparatively get a lot more, let's say, tier 5 basics, right? If you compare how many tier 5 basics you get from initial chapters of Act 6 exploration to compare what you can get from Thronebreaker Glory Store every single week just for playing AQ, it's not even a real comparison. Therefore, as kind of like a rule of thumb, any content that repeats itself, that's, consistent and replayable, typically has better rewards than a content that has been in the contest for a couple of years, because those rewards get updated, static content doesn't. Right, those notes put aside, and this guide starts from the point you kind of become Cavalier, the point where you do 6.1 completion. Up until that, again, I kind of just laid it out. Just, complete your Act 5. You do not complete your Act 5. You do not necessarily need to explore entire Act 5, and and try and complete 6.1 as early as possible, even when you have like a handful of 6 stars, even if you need to use some rewards, because getting to the higher progression level can significantly boost your progression speed. Why better glory store, why better offers, why better everything else, basically, by daily crystals or solo events and everything. It is very important to get to a higher progression title as early as possible. Right, so this guide starts from the point you become Cavalier and defeat, 6.1. Then my recommendation is start doing variant content completion runs. I think those are relatively easy to do. And variant completion runs and then later on exploration runs is a great way how to increase your roster depth. You can get a ton of rank up gems for exploring individual chapters, and with that, obviously, it still holds quite a lot of catalyst value in them. Plus, on top of that, variant content also will give you a lot of player experience, how to deal with problems, how to answer, specific nodes, because a lot of the nodes that you will see in variant, you will see across the other game modes, but comparatively speaking, variant is just a quicker, briefer, and easier game mode kind of where to contend with. Variants do have unnaturally high attack, and they can feel punishing, but the health pools in variants are relatively low, comparatively speaking, in like 130, 160k health pool mark, somewhere there. And again, they are way lower than in Act 6 and 7. So I do recommend, after becoming Cavalier player, to jump in variants for a bit, if you can, and start doing completion runs. Then, as you are doing that, also use any of your free energy, slowly exploring Act 5. Act 5 is long, Act 5 is tedious. However, those mastery points are going to come in play sooner than later. This is also a point where I do recommend investing in masteries. I do not recommend investing in Cav crystals ever. Cav crystals is the worst unitary investment ever. Masteries is by far the best unitary investment ever. So this is also a perfect time to kind of work on your mastery setup and slowly start unlocking better and better setups, because with proper mastery setup, this game becomes a lot easier. Now, after that, you can start exploring variant content, except variant 1. And then you need to go on and do that Act 6 completion. I do not necessarily recommend trying to explore much of Act 6 until much, much later on, because again, rewards to effort-wise, Act 6 is a horrible piece of content, and you do not get the best returns for your time and revive spent in Act 6 in general. Maybe with the exception of 6.1, because 6.1 is still relatively very straightforward and easy quest compared, so I still kind of recommend getting the 6.1 done, but leaving the rest of it for sure till later. And this is also somewhere along the lines, the point upon completion of Act 6, when you kind of expected to become Thronebreaker, but even if you don't, then you can quickly fix that by having unlocked access to Act 7. Even if you do not have much in terms of tier 5 CC yet formed, then Act 7 completion can automatically change that. Only thing you really need to do is run through 7.1 to 7.4 and pretty much Y selectors and anything else that you have earned up until now, you are probably going to be able to become Thronebreaker. If not, it is also very much so worth saving up a bunch of units before completing any of the chapters in Act 7, because there are tier 5 CC catalyst selectors in those completion offers, and you can push yourself over the goal line that way. So at the point when you do have access to Act 7, you can very quickly become Thronebreaker, and that is the kind of like point when I would expect most people to become Thronebreaker. If that is not good enough, and if saving units is not your strong suit, then you can try starting to explore like Act 7.1, and that should be enough because there will be some selectors. But again, I do not recommend necessarily exploring Act 7 straight away. Just do the completion as far as you can and get that done. And then obviously we do have Karina challenges. You can throw these about in whichever order you kind of want. This first set of Karina challenges are the ones that I overall consider to be the weakest one. Every single one of these can virtually be done with no items or maybe a couple of revives. And these are just neat, easy ways to get, extra rewards via Mystic Dispersed, 1992, 1997 from first set, the 3 Realm of Legends challenges, based on whatever 3 stars you have, because obviously they have hardly any, roster requirement. Astral Anger is also relatively easy, straightforward challenge to do. And you can juggle these about before you start, completing rest of Act 7 if you become Thronebreaker earlier on. But I listed them there because this is the point where you're kind of expected to be a Thronebreaker player. And then you can just, start enjoying the benefits, because these challenges quite literally just demand a tiny bit of time, no real significant resource cost, and you can get your 6-star dual class crystals, you can get some rank up materials and everything else that comes with these challenges. Then past that point, I do recommend getting Act 7 exploration in as early as possible, even if your roster isn't massive. Fact of the matter is, Act 7, most of the nodes are fairly open source, and they do not really, fairly open, and they do not really require a specific counter. In a lot of lanes, you don't have to get that damage increase. You can still get those fights done, and that will obviously also let you grow as a player. Meanwhile, as you are doing it, pending whatever pace you are working on that Act 7, focus on your alliance, focus on your improving your alliance rankings and pushing your team modes, because that obviously is a significant part of progression as well, because eventually content's can run out, and your alliance, and alliance game modes are the ones that have infinite replayability. Right, so assuming that you have explored Act 7, in my opinion, then it's best to start focusing on some slightly harder arena challenges, like Asgardian Cheddar. It's doable with 3-star Loki. It's probably going to take you 10, 15 revives. Definitely very doable. Super Punch Out, bite the bullet, rank up that Kamal Khan, get that one in. Or if you really don't want to, you can always just skip these individual ones. Then we have the Volume 2 challenges that are in Act 6, which all of them can be done with, a couple of revives. I think I used 8 revives in between all 3 of these challenges. Sick Beast of a Player can definitely be done with no revives. New Heroes and Foes also can be done with no revives, and the Revolution probably a couple of revives, depending how good you are at Grandmaster fight. I have guides for all of this content, by the way. If you have any question, just type in KT1, name of the content or name of the chapter, name of the quest, and I will have guide for that. Everything past 6.2, I have a guide for, because that's when I started, properly doing YouTube and releasing guides. So guides for all of the latter variants. I have guides for 6.2, 3, 4, Act 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, and every single Karina challenge. And there are live streams where I do this content multiple times, actually, in some cases. So you can just type in KT1 and whatever name of the content, and you will find a guide for all of these in case you are struggling with that. Right. So here is the next kind of conglomerate of content that's already kind of harder. I do think that if you have the roster for it, and again, that depends what kind of champions you have, you can do the Abyss completion run relatively early on. It's not the biggest deal. It will, again, help you grow as a player. You can also leave it till a bit later and combine your initial Abyss completion run with one of these Karina challenges if you choose to do so. But then we have the Karina's challenge initial one, O Canada, which is fairly straightforward. You need to have a 4-star Sabertooth and a 4-star Sasquatch. The rest of the champions are fairly inconsequential, and you can get it done with, couple dozen revives. It isn't, or 30 revives or something like that. It's definitely doable. It's quite fun, to be honest. And past that point, we again can kind of interchange here. You can start exploring Act 6 point. You can start exploring the rest of Act 6, which I don't think is amazing return of value, but still has that TF5CC in it. It still has the 6-star Awakening Gem, 6-star shards, and some more resources. And also, I think community has a very negative view of Act 6, and kind of rightfully so, because for a permanent content, it was out of place. It was not designed as a story content, in my opinion. But as a challenge mode type of content, I loved it. I love to push myself. And it, again, is just one of those pieces of content that if you approach it reasonably with proper roster, it's not as bad as people remember it. Because when we were doing it, we only had like a handful of champions. You know, at rank 5, there were no rank 2 or 3 6-stars, which you should have at this point, obviously, if you are Thronebreaker. And also, we have a ton of new champions that have been released since that do answer a lot of problems that there used to be. And on top of that, Act 6 has been nerfed and made easier than it was as well. So it depends on you how you feel about Act 6, but my recommendation would be probably to start exploring it here, couple lanes at a time, and start accumulating resources for these item swallowing arena challenges, because everything else past this point is a resource dump. Every single challenge here will require, 20, 30, 40 revives and stuff like that. And Act 6 can be done without, or can be done with very few amount. So why I put Act 6 here is largely because you can do a couple parts at a time as you are accumulating your stashed resources. In this game in general, for most part, I personally believe that you should not be spending your units for revives. You should not be spending your units for health potions. I do think that you should be spending your units for masteries, and I do think that you should be spending your units for good offers as and when they come along, because the rest of the resources you can kind of accumulate yourself for free, and that is, in my opinion, not the best investment. But again, that's kind of up to you how aggressively you want to progress, and if you want to grind units for and then use those units for revives and stuff like that. It's just, I think it's much more cost and time efficient to go and farm revives in 3.26 or 5.36 for energy refills than it is to actually spend many units on them. And that's why Act 6 is here, because you can do Act 6 and then on a parallel line just slowly accumulate resources to tackle the harder Korean challenges, which will be Mike's Revenge, which is a BS of a challenge. But, eventually you will want to complete all of them anyhow. And then we have the 3 Abyss challenges. Now, why do I put these 3 Abyss challenges before the Abyss exploration? Obviously, because you can do the Abyss challenge and do a completely new path at the same time, and you can kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So you will save yourself Abyss path clearing cost, because you will be clearing that Abyss path using, Karina challenges kind of resources there, if you want to look at it that way. But basically, you do not need to redo content. You can just do Mutant Domination, pick path 5, for instance, and then you're going to have, another path of Abyss explored. Do Karina challengers, pick path 3, or whichever, and then you're going to have another Abyss path explored. And then ideally at this point you only would have 1 or 2 paths left to explore Abyss. Brilliant. And as the very last ones that are definitely just stupid and are complete resource traps in this game, we have Karina's Challenge Dance Off. This is by far the most expensive one. It was like 60 revives or something. And then we have Inhuman Stamina, which is also very long, about 5 hours in there, and it is quite expensive. So this is more or less the order that I have sorted them in. Truth to be told, again, all of this that I have marked in, starting from 25 to 31, all of it extremely item consuming. A lot of people who play this game will likely, or possibly will never do this, because it does cost a lot of items, and it does, mean that you need to be fairly committed. Then everything around these exploration of Act 7 and these Korean challenges can be interchanged whenever and however you feel like it. But as a general rule of thumb, so you can see that these are the initial steps. That is what you want to follow thereabouts later on. And this is, just for the most advanced players. So that is more or less how I currently see all of the content in the game. And if you do have any questions, obviously feel free to ask or pop in the live stream, and I'll try my best to advise, as I always do. And I don't think you guys necessarily need access to this spreadsheet, but I suppose I will add a link to this spreadsheet if you want to take a look later on. But you can probably just take some. It's fine. I'll leave a link in the video description But I hope you guys found it useful, and yeah, I'll catch you guys later. See ya.
Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about